Good day, good evening, good night. Welcome to 1964 of the H series. I will continue today with Wittgenstein's Non-Cognitivism Explained and Vindicated by Eugen Fischer. Last time we start talking about irrational, especially. I got a bit fascinated by that the irrational is reacting directly, unthinkingly. It is not something that we can observe. We just do it. At the very bottom of this doing, there is nothing really. There is no reason. There is no thinking through. This is what meant by irrational. We never thought it through. We just do it. It just happens. The Wittgensteinian method tries to take away our suspicions or our preemptive explanations for why the things are like they are. And he uses, to say the least, weird methods. So he tried to make explanations for how something is. And one by one, we understand that these explanations are not good enough, they're not fit. How could a reader of philosophical investigations understand that? To tell you the truth, they cannot. Wittgenstein did not write for the broader public. Maybe his audience were about 20 people who know about these things or were sharp enough to tell the one thing from the other and also to get this very, very odd pedagogy. And he does his best of giving explanations. They are the best explanations we can ever come up with. And you're given those for free. And of course, if you accept them, you won't go any further. And that's it. Maybe you were never supposed to go any further. It is still Wittgenstein. Mr. Fawlty, Basil Fawlty in 40 Towers, he once told Manuel, when he didn't understand that he should take out a pigeon out of the water tank, it's not bleeding Wittgenstein. So he got a feeling for it. I don't think it's far from the case. Excessively difficult. So I'm not particularly keen with that phrase as well, but maybe it's helpful for others. I still will mention it. The philosopher's treatment of a question is like the treatment of an illness. I prefer that something is neglected by us. And by having explanations, we sort of makes it impossible to get deeper into something. For instance, if you see a fire somewhere and you directly say as an explanation, well, it's a fire because I think it's probably the neighbors who are burning some leaves, it's autumn, then no further explanation is needed. You stop it. So explanations are incredibly stopping. the only thing that can stop. If you tell yourself not to think any further, that won't make any difference. But an explanation will do that. And I say that will work a little bit like first you ask a question and then you have a sort of an explanation. And if we have that at bottom and then try to think, it will amount to T, a philosophical theory. Wittgenstein's aim is to describe, not to explain, describe what's happens. And the only thing that we are supposed to do, only, is to either accept his explanations or his descriptions, or not. That's it. And that will liberate us from the groundless disquiet we may have. And we will no longer strand in unnecessary explanations. Explanations like there is an inner intention or something of that sort. Things we know from earlier, they end in paradox. And we are a bit stuck then. We are like a fly in a fly bottle. Somebody needs to open the cork and show us the way out of it. I also come to think of that monkey. They have a walnut in a glass jar, and the throat of the glass jar is wide enough for the monkey to put his hand in. But when he grabs the walnut at the bottom of the jar, he makes a fist, of course, and then he cannot take the walnut out. According to the myth, the monkey dies of starvation. I don't think it's true. But in this way, we are stuck. I will continue to read where I left off. We are presently at page 64. It's the last paragraph on that page. Wittgenstein, I have to read the previous sentence, the two options. But should try A, to liberate ourselves from what groundless feelings of intellectual disquiet we may have, and B, to get ourselves into a position to give up without regret what pointless explanatory efforts we may have made. More than welcome. Wittgenstein explicitly adopts the first of these two aims as his own paramount goal. In the investigation, he remains silent about his aims in line with a potentially unhelpful view that if this book is written as it should be, then everything I say must be easily understandable, trivial, but it should be difficult to understand why I say it. In his earlier big typescript, however, Wittgenstein clearly identifies the task he set himself. Here, in his most extensive discussion of philosophical method, he stresses again and again the disquiet or uneasiness engendered in us by wrong analogies. Wrong analogies. Analogies.
Wrong. Ouch.
Wrong. Disorder in our concepts and misleading expressions. Wittgenstein's declared chief aim is the removal of this disquiet.
Quiet.
Why disquiet? As I do philosophy, its entire task is to shape expression in such a way that certain disquietudes disappear. He seeks freedom from those deep disquietudes that arise through various forms of misinterpretation. As he puts it at the time of his final round of work on the investigations, his paramount aim is to achieve a certain kind of peace of mind. Thoughts at peace, that is the goal someone who philosophizes longs for. Longs for. They long for, all of them, Plato, Aristotle, Hegel. To sum up, 1. Suspension of belief in the things he is inclined to say and find intuitively compelling enabled Wittgenstein 2. To establish the systematic lack of warrant or meaning of these intuitions and to conceptualize the problems arising from the real or apparent conflict with facts or other beliefs as pseudo problems generated by urges to misunderstand. When we find such problems compelling, in spite of the patent lack of warrant or latent lack of meaning, all we can reasonably seek to do is A, to remove our groundless feelings of intellectual disquiet, and B, put an end to what pointless reconciliatory efforts we may have made. Accordingly, 3, Wittgenstein explicitly adopts the first of these two aims as his paramount goal. Indeed, it does. The pursuit of aims such as these is what makes an effort qualify as, quite literally, a kind of therapy. Philosophers, such as recently Hanfling, frequently think of therapy in the usual sense as necessarily opposed to argument, and assume that the use of non-argumentative methods must set therapeutic intervention apart from rational discourse. But this is not so. Even exemplary psychotherapies like cognitive therapy and rational emotive therapy for depression crucially involve argument and the assessment of evidence. Therapy may proceed by argument. Therapeutic dialogue may be a form of rational discourse. What makes such a dialogue therapeutic are not the means employed, but the ends pursued, which are anyway the only things that the very different forms of psychotherapy have in common. Wanting, first and foremost, not to demonstrate certain facts or conclusions, but A, to remove disabling, distressing, or disquieting emotions, and B, to modify dysfunctional behavior. These frequently used formulations need to be rendered more precise in two respects. First, it is more accurately the adoption of one or both of these aims as paramount goals that makes a dialogue therapeutic. Therapeutic! 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 Therapeutic. After all, successful therapeutic argument will repudiate or establish substantive claims. Therapeutic and cognitive aims, therefore, are not mutually exclusive, but hierarchically ordered, hierarchically, getting tired, hierarchically, ordered. The therapist wants to establish and demonstrate facts, not as an end in itself, but to achieve certain therapeutic effects. A cognitive therapist demonstrates such facts as the depressed patient's interpretation of life situations is systematically biased, and that the resulting negative self-evaluations are unrealistic. Unrealistic, indeed. In order to relieve the distress the patient feels when overwhelmed by his supposed worthlessness. Second, therapy targets not all emotions and behaviors that are distressing or dysfunctional, but merely those that are also unwarranted or unreasonable. Unreasonable. When a psychologist teaches firemen how to better cope with fear in dangerous situations, or helps a bereaved friend to get over her loss, his efforts will only be described as therapy if the fear and grief at issue are excessive and unreasonable. For instance, if the friend is paralyzed by the conviction that she is unable to live alone, or that her life is now irretrievably devoid of meaning and direction. Direction.
Direction.
Direction, direction. The aims whose pursuit makes an effort qualify, literally, as a therapy, hence are more precisely those are putting an end to A, unwarranted and disabling, distressing, or disquieting emotions, and B, unreasonable and dysfunctional behavior. These aims are informed by an ideal of health first developed in Plato's Republic. The ideal of a balanced, rational agents who can master his feelings and actions so as to be truly autonomous. We count as in need of therapy and hence ill when we fall significantly short of this ideal. Ideal. The ideal. Ideal. This happens, for instance, when our emotions overwhelm us more than momentarily, preventing us from acting in accord with our own considered beliefs and desires, as we would act when not thus overwhelmed. And it happens in a rather different way when one specific kind of situation arises in abstract reflection, namely when inferential urges overwhelms us. Overwhelm. When they have us systematically expose ideas, we are in a position to see through, and thus give rise to groundless worries and reconsideratory efforts we would dismiss as pointless and abstain from, if not thus overwhelmed. In conjunction with this ideal, the account of nature and genesis of some philosophical problems that we developed above provides a novel and sharply focused rationale for therapeutic efforts in philosophy. This rationale is so radically different from that informing Pyrrhonian skepticism, the first and most familiar model of therapy in philosophy, often invoked to clarify Wittgenstein's allusions to therapy. Therapy.
Therapy. Therapy. Therapy. Therapy.
Therapy.
You therapy.
Yes.
Therapy. Therapy. Therapy.
This ancient movement sought to attain first a permanent state of suspension of judgment on matters intellectual and moral, and thereby second, peace of mind in those things that pertain to opinion and moderation, in the things which life imposes. A kind of equanimity that prevents us from either avoiding or seeking anything eagerly like an eagle, eagerly. Wittgenstein, by contrast, temporarily suspends belief in certain things. He is inclined to say in abstract reflection, with a view to assessing his warrant for them more soberly, without wine and beer.
Oh no. Oh no.
He then does pass judgment on them as he rejects these intuitions as unwarranted and puts them down to urges to misunderstand. He thereby pursues not the general aim of freeing himself from the raving of all passions, intellectual and other, but the rather specific aim of liberating himself from the raving of all passions, intellectual and other. But the rather specific aim of liberating himself from the groundless intellectual disquiet that seizes him whenever inferential urges overwhelm him in abstract reflection. Sextus's endeavors can be usefully grouped with psychotherapies which address all pervasive emotions and general patterns of behavior, depressive lethargy, manic euphoria, anxiety, etc., compulsive, disorganized, catatonic behavior, etc. The therapeutic project pioneered by Wittgenstein, by contrast, addresses entirely different, far more specific and specifically philosophical phenomena as sort of groundless disquiet and pointless theorizing we are prone to in abstract reflection. It is therefore more helpful to regard his efforts as constitutive of a therapy sui generis, the first genuinely philosophical therapy. Therapy! 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 How great! To sum up, the decisive reorientation of philosophical work that turns it into literally a distinctive kind of therapy is the reorientation at the level of the guiding aims. This reorientation, namely the adoption as paramount goal for philosophical work of aims that can be subsumed under one or both of the general headings of A and B above, we can call the therapeutic turn. The therapeutic turn. Up to now, we have seen that it is warranted where philosophers worry about ill-motivated reconciliation problems, and that Wittgenstein, who addresses such problems, says that he takes his turn as he states a guiding aim whose actual pursuit would turn his work into a genuinely philosophical therapy. Therapy. So just before subtitle or sub-rubric, Wittgenstein's actual aim, I put a stop to 1966, the birth year of the construction.
Page 6.
What page is 66?
It's page 66.
As well.
Great. Lecture 1966. And we ended on page 66. Perfect. And we can show that this is, and this is really the birth of deconstruction.
Oh.
Yes, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
21st of October, hallelujah.
So you can read about this.
Peter Solomon.
Yes.
Peter Solomon, yes, I remember him.
October.
Over there at the flat in, and outside as well. Yes, I remember now. In Stockholm. How could I? Thank you very much, Kalle, for bringing that nice memory up to surface. That was indeed a dinner as well. Roe deer steak and mushroom sauce. And not a lot of smiles coming from the part of his name now. Never mind. Let's see here. Go to page 64. What a very fitting couple of pages here, because they were easy enough for this late hour after a rather taxing day, I'd say. To the end. On that page, so the 3 lines up, we just mentioned some of the quotes taken by Eugen Fischer. He stresses again and again the disquiet or uneasiness engendered in us by wrong analogies, disorder in our concepts, and misleading expressions. Wittgenstein's declared chief aim is the removal of this disquiet. So he wouldn't like to explain it. He wouldn't like a new ideology or a philosophy T, as we looked into philosophy T earlier on with Hao Tang and Francis Y. Lin, because that philosophical theory or explanation would just give us an illusionary relief. We'll be put on top of the problem because there isn't really a problem from the beginning. So these treatments or the other treatments or a new ideology, whatever it might be, or philosophy will just make things worse. Nothing is out of order. Language is working. It has always worked. Nobody can change that. It's a bit like that character in Jurassic Park who laughs at the people who think that the world would go under. Nothing can change the world. It's a system too safe for you men to do anything about. I don't know if it's true for the world, but it's definitely true for language. On the next page, it's a sort of a reiteration of that in the quote. Thoughts at peace, that is the goal someone who philosophers longs for. And that is contested and witnessed from people who watch Plato, Immanuel Kant, but also more benevolent people like Henri Bergson. And the recent example is the cry from Putnam. They seem to be in pain somehow. Sometimes they admit it until they look for other solutions. I think the best examples, all categories, and I know I mentioned this before, is Sir Bertrand Russell, or Lord Bertrand Russell. He wasn't a Sir, he was Lord. He changed philosophical inclinations at least a dozen times. That is torture. That's nothing but torture. That's a torturous life. Wasted life even. But he didn't have a choice. There wasn't a problem to solve from the beginning. And that's the reason for A further down here. We seek, it's a bit up. We seek there to remove our groundless feelings of intellectual disquiet and put an end to what pointless And this reconciliatory efforts we may have made, we make a lot of reconciliatory efforts. We read book after book, or we enter into new subjects, or worse, we change philosophies every 5 years or 7, I think, befitting with his the long life of Bertrand Russell. Wittgenstein explicitly adopts the first of these two aims as his paramount goal. Go to the next page. At the end of the second paragraph, we find when, it's a sort of such a long sentence, I will cut it apart. When inferential urges overwhelm us, the inferential urges are automatic. We are not aware of them. Thereby, they are not unconscious. Don't confuse them with being unconscious. It's the second paragraph, if I count the first 2 lines as a paragraph. Otherwise, it's the first paragraph. Yeah. Thus, they gave rise to groundless worries and reconciliatory efforts we would dismiss as pointless and abstain from, if not thus overwhelmed. I would take a specific lecture to mention a couple of those. I mentioned the get-here problem. There is also, of course, brain in the that. It's the question of the hard problem formulated by David Chalmers. That is solvable or dissolvable, actually. We don't get an explanation for consciousness. We just see it as it is a pointless question because it's absolutely meaningless. It is not because consciousness is proven, was proven that we have a soul, nothing of the kind. It is that it is from the beginning a completely pointless question, meaningless to the core in itself. And as a sort of clarification here for the risk for our listeners, and now we go to the next paragraph that begins with in conjunction, and about 12 lines down or 10. Wittgenstein, by contrast, temporarily suspends belief in certain things he is inclined to say in abstract reflection, with a view to assessing his warrant for them more soberly. I would say that is something that you should remember. It's absolutely putable into gilded, put into stone. But compare that, and here's the danger. If you go like 10 lines down here, as a sort of clarification, the therapeutic project pioneered by Wittgenstein, by contrast, addresses entirely different, far more specific and specifically philosophical phenomena. As sort of groundless disquiet and pointless theorizing, we are prone to in abstract reflection. We are prone to that when we do abstract reflection. It doesn't mean at all that there's something mysterious or something that needs to be dissolved when it comes to abstract reflection. And as we mentioned many times before, on the contrary, if we begin with this groundless disquiet and pointless theorizing, abstract reflection would be severely impaired. which I, for myself, this is not coming from Eugen Fischer nor Wittgenstein, I think is hugely impaired today. There I go with Ian McGilchrist. There is no longer any abstract reflection because the groundless, disquiet, and pointless theorizing takes all the energy. It's a bit like if you're suffering from anemia, I actually had a friend many years ago who did. You will be tired all day long. That will suck up at least 80% of your energy. And you're simply not informed to do any good work at all. He can do it until he got rid of his anemia. The same happens when we are caught up in this almost sick thinking. I wouldn't call it sick though, but because it's so common, everybody does it. Then we will have no choice other to get so tired in the end and so intellectually exhausted, so stupid reconciliatory theories and within abstract thinking they will do. We're too tired to think them through. Yes, this is what I want to say. We are simply too tired or too blunt in our thinking capacity to think them through, to get out of the Platonic cave, so to speak. So in that sense, it's very close to therapy, although I don't usually like the word therapy, but in this case it is. It's close to a person who's suffering from low self-esteem or something like that, and say, oh, I'm not worthing, anything I do is not worthing. And then the psychotherapist says, but look here, you did this, and that. Here's something similar. The language is working, it's healthy. There's nothing wrong with it. We do not have to explain any words. We do not have to say that every word has a meaning. We do not have to say that there was an original intention that we can never see, speak, or point to even. That will lead us even deeper into philosophical disquietude. Come in, folks. More than welcome.
Thank you.
Kalle, Media.
You saw the references to Sextus Philosopher. I don't know if you can count him as a Stoic. No, not really. He is empirical philosopher, perhaps.
Well, there you have pure hornies.
He belongs to empirical school. So I don't know. There is references to Plato and to Sextus. My guess is that, and then especially this phrase here, this phrase here, thoughts at peace. Thoughts at peace.
Yeah.
I would say this phrase is very Stoic. And I would say is taken out of context. My proposal is that Fischer is trying to turn Wittgenstein into a Stoic philosopher.
Yeah, why not?
Like think about the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, some kind of Stoic philosopher. And let's assume that Fischer's interpretation is correct, or my interpretation of Fischer's Wittgenstein, like a Stoic philosopher, is correct. Then he would be radically different from, let's say, from Heidegger. Heidegger, his therapy is to shock people, to arrive at authenticity, you need this shock.
Yeah.
That you need to be waken up. That was fundamental for Heidegger. And there is no speech of that here in Fischer. And I don't know, would you agree that Fischer's interpretation of Wittgenstein is correct? I have my doubts, but I want to hear your opinion.
Well, it's a rather bland part of this article, and my take on the whole thing, my personal take, understands for me, is like he just want to point to one side in Wittgenstein, and this is the thing that how we sort of spend our thinking. We don't even discover our own thinking, not because it's unconscious, but we are so used to explanations. So explanations covers, and we don't reach. And then he decorates his language a bit here with references to Stoicism and Pyrrhonism and that. Not really necessary, but it was a fun read though. But it could take the focus away from the most important, which is these are actually pseudo problems. For me, it's very helpful to think them as pseudo problems. There are other problems everywhere, all over the world, that are problems. There are maybe a third kind of problems that are already solved. But these are of a specific kind. They are pseudo problems. So trying to solve them will lead to reconciliatory problems. You can still do abstract thinking. And I think even, I make it even stronger. I think that we can go through these things is absolutely necessary to have any sort of abstract thinking. So I'm sharpening it a bit.
Let me take up another thing here in this part. It was Fischer's references to a psychologist. And Fischer takes up this example as in a positive terms. But we know that Wittgenstein had strong reservations against psychology. My take is that Fischer turns, for the first, Wittgenstein into a Stoic philosopher, and then he turns Wittgenstein into a psychologist almost. That's my take so far. Let me see. Let me see. Psychology does turn up often in. Let me take only a few examples here. Let me see. Psychology is important for Wittgenstein, but he has strong reservations against psychology, against Freud. But I don't know if he would compare himself with a psychologist.
No, Wittgenstein wouldn't do that, and I think it was Anscombe. I'm not 100% sure. Callan Media and everybody's listening, who invented the idea that the Wittgensteinian philosophy, or what he does, is some sort of therapy, but only in that limited sense that it could be helpful. That you can use some, maybe you have some problem. You can take my friend who suffered from anemia. He got some sort of therapy. You get my drift. He was treated with iron injections, and iron pills. In that sense, Wittgenstein is a sort of therapy. But he had problems with Freud and psychology because a very, very short summary is that he felt that psychology was transferring problems that belonged in science into a field where they didn't belong. And the intention inside of the head is not something that we can put under empirical measure, because there is no original intention. That very, very shortly is what he doesn't like. Oh, you have it there. You actually
Yes.
you quick. 571, misleading parallels. Psychology treats processes in the mental sphere, as does physics in the physical. And he says this is a grammatical problem, not an empirical problem.
So this shows that Fischer's analogy is misleading, I say, to take in psychology, because Fischer uses psychology in a positive term, but
replace it with physiotherapy.
okay,
Yes.
let's say physiotherapy to save them.
But as you know, I mentioned before, I'm not so happy with the idea that it's a sort of therapy either. It can be quite misleading.
If Mirja wants to say something, please, please.
Yeah, dear Mirja, come in.
Perhaps we should end there, otherwise.
Well, thank you very much, Kalle, for your deep insights here and to pinpointing 171 so quick. That was more quick than a flash. Wow. I just mentioned it, it was already there. Excellent. Have a very nice night, evening, or day, wherever you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mirja.